speak. I have 20 minutes to address the question, what other issues remain about the full inclusion of women in the church? Would that it were such a breeze. In July, I found myself in a dilemma. I'd been invited to the 3-day pre-Lambeth event initiated by Christina and to be attended by women bishops of the Anglican Communion and many of the senior clergywomen of the Church of England, and potentially me. But I had a 9-week-old baby, and I could only get there if he could come too. And it was a he as well. My dilemma was this. Would turning up to such an event with a baby be perceived as an acceptable or even a radical thing to do? Or would I just look like that incompetent woman who can't organise her childcare? So I emailed a colleague to ask what she thought, and she replied with some passion, "Bring the baby." It reminds us all, even the non-mothers like me, that women are trying to do things differently, that we are different, and that we do have a different hinterland from our male colleagues. A different hinterland. Our hinterland is the stuff that surrounds and shapes us. The experiences, the places, the relationships and encounters that make us what we are. Male or female, we all have a hinterland. To describe a little more of mine, I'm 40, married with 3 children, aged 6, 4 and 4 months, and I've been ordained 12 years. I served my title in a suburban parish in Lancaster, and then for 7 years was on the team at St Martin in the Fields in Trafalgar Square. 2 years ago, I decided not to become a vicar, because juggling that particular role with vocations to marriage and parenting felt just a little bit too precarious. Many men, and some women, do it of course, and very creatively. Lay people too live out complex combinations of callings, but it didn't feel as though this particular juggling act was the right one. So I spent the last 2 years working out what it might mean to be a portfolio priest, or some would argue a priest without portfolio. I do some writing and some radio broadcasting. I'm a trustee of a couple of church-related organisations and chair of governors of a church high school. I work on issues relating to female clergy, both in London and nationally, and I have a very complicated childcare rota, which often makes me think it might have been simpler to have one very full-time job after all. But a lot of women live like this. This is our hinterland. The Palestinian poet Mahmoud Darwish wrote, "Only by chance did the land become holy. A prophet set foot there, and when he prayed on a rock, it wept, and the mount fell prostrate in piety." We make holy ground of the places where we eat, sleep, walk, pray, weep, and love. We make holy ground of ourselves and others. Making holy ground is about embracing the sacred in the world, discovering the divine in the detail of our lives, and finding the sublime in the ridiculous. But by virtue of many things, our birth, ethnicity, social background, sexuality, and gender, for example, we all have different holy ground. We bring with us wounds and insights that are ours because of what has happened to us and what we have seen. And once we've discovered our own ground as holy, if we're to know more of God, we need to take the risk of engaging with people whose hinterlands are very different from our own. Which is why, if in the final analysis the Church fails to embrace fully the experience of women, what we all learn of God will be seriously diminished. But do women have a different hinterland? Many women would now say that we've been formed and educated in the same ways as men. Some of us are wary of gender generalisations. Every time I begin a sentence with the words "women tend to" or "women are better at," I want to add a disclaimer to say that there are men like that too. I'm also sceptical about some of the easy gender comparisons that are made, such as women are more collaborative and exercise authority in a less hierarchical way. Yes, some women, but certainly not all. And surely we know some collaborative men.
I know.
Surely some of us might possibly know some collaborative men. I do. Yet, I'm drawn back to the fact that a room full of women feels different from a room full of men, which feels different from a room full of men and women. that there are some meetings I take part in where I can be momentarily paralysed by the thought that I am the only clergywoman present, and that the statistics tell me that the number of women at the top of most professions is still relatively small and has recently gone down in many areas. Women do have different experiences and a different hinterland, and this is partly about our history. For centuries, women's lives were lived almost wholly in the domestic sphere. Our experience of building and shaping community, taking initiative and exercising leadership was primarily in that context. Canon Anne Dyer, Warden of Cranmer Hall, traces all of this most movingly through the history of art and through paintings of women. It's only actually in the past few generations that women have won an unprecedented share of what we might call public space. It's still pioneering for us to take authority in a public context. Even in 2008, in the majority of marriages, the woman will be the main caregiver if there are children or dependent parents, and in the majority of occupations, women will be overrepresented amongst the part-time workers and underrepresented in the senior roles. So we do have both a different history and some different perspectives to offer, even before we address the question of sexuality and the hinterlands that gay women bring with them. In the church, women sometimes find ourselves unable to name or describe the things that we find difficult about the culture we've inherited, so it can take us a long time to find our feet. Yesterday I met with a group of women from across different dioceses. We spoke about our experience of being in meetings where otherwise bright, articulate and engaged women, both clergy and lay, remain strangely silent. What is that all about? It's about what it can do to your confidence to operate constantly within a culture which has been primarily shaped by people who are in some way distinctively different from yourself. At a clergy conference some years ago, the few women present were all struck by what happened to us during the first hymn of the first act of worship. The bass voices around us rose to the occasion, and suddenly we quite simply couldn't hear ourselves, let alone be heard. It's a great metaphor for those times when we do speak out, and so little of what we say seems to penetrate the discussion that we feel as though we're talking in a foreign language, or at best English with a very regional accent. It's meant as a metaphor, but sometimes it can literally feel as though you're on the outside with one of these. So the issues that remain about the full inclusion of women in the church are at root cultural issues. I don't advocate throwing out the baby with the bathwater. Men have nurtured the church wonderfully in many ways, and we need to keep what's good and take it forward. But I am talking about shaping and refreshing the culture in such a way that women, lesbian or straight, lay or ordained, are more able to find themselves in it. I'm secretary to the National Association of Diocesan Advisors in Women's Ministry, or NADOM for short. Via our email network, we debate questions such as, do women lead differently? What does the church think leadership is anyway? Where do women get their role models? Is parish ministry ill-shaped for female clergy? Why don't more women clergy apply for senior roles? Why are women more likely to be incumbents of rural churches than city churches, of smaller congregations than larger ones? Why are so few women given the responsibility of being training incumbents? How can we challenge the endemic long hours culture amongst clergy? How can clergy couples be creatively deployed so that she doesn't always end up following him around? And slightly tongue-in-cheek, what do clergy wear when they're pregnant? Yes, when they're quite obviously a different shape and bringing something different to the party. A lot of these issues sound as though they're just about HR, but they are actually about the ways in which organisational structures and cultural assumptions can prevent us from fully tapping into the experience, the wisdom and the perspectives of a particular group of people, in this case women.